Hello, everybody. Today is Friday, December 5th. I found this. This is an opinion piece I found on the Globe and Mail. I thought it was really key for what's going on today in Canada's federal budgets. Quite frankly, because this is supposed to be one of the biggest spending uh, line items in the federal budget, right? But what's key in this whole situation is that the world is rearming, right? And great power conflict isn't really theoretical anymore. And Canada's just quite simply coasted on American protection for probably 70 years. And this is really ending. This era is ending, and this is why the spending bill is coming to fruition. Obviously, this has all been, let's say, fast tracked by Donald Trump forcing NATO members to respect the 2% of GDP figure. And really, what it comes down to is if a sovereign nation needs to defend itself, right? Dependent nations wait for others to defend it, to do the defending for them, right? And this is really key. If Canada really wants to consider itself sovereign, we need to defend ourselves. And quite frankly, the only way to do that is through, well, there's a number of ways of doing it, but one of the main basic ways is your military, right? And then you have espionage networks as well, and economy and that type of influence, right? But usually the main way you want to defend your actual borders, whether they're maritime, whether they're skies, whether it's land, is with the military, right? And that deterrence is always key, right? Eventual wisdom in budget 2025 did not meet the high bar for the Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance set in the pre-budget posturing. Most commentators judge the budget overwhelmingly on productivity, weak on housing, and vacant on affordability. Yes. I Canada's overall in a very tough spot, right? So you can't, like, when it comes to housing, productivity, affordability, all of that has to be tweaked in some way or another. But our national defense is also key. And it doesn't seem like it's a key line item in Canadian society just because we have these other things going on. But truly, if you want to be able to defend an opinion geopolitically, have any force behind it, you have to have a strong military and you have to have a strong espionage network. That's just the way it goes, right? One of the greatest ways, I'm just going to use this as an example, one of the greatest ways that you can look at that is, for instance, Israel right now. I mean, aside from what's going on in Gaza, they literally killed a whole bunch of people. The Mossad did with defect pagers. Essentially, they just blew up a bunch of people like from their pockets. Yeah, like, you know what I mean. So this is you really need to focus on this, and it's hard to focus on it when you don't have a clear enemy, right? Like countries like Israel, who are surrounded by people that don't like them. Not going to get into the politics of the Middle East, but they're surrounded by countries that don't really like them, and so they're forced to constantly worry about who's trying to kill them, right? Canada hasn't really had that problem, right? And because of that, we've systematically left ourselves exposed on all fronts, right? And so it goes on national defense. However, the budget could be transformative, though not in the way the current discourse suggests. Defense spending commitments are poised to remake the role of the federal government in the years to come. There hasn't been a budget in living memory that focuses more on more of its numbers and narrative on the defense file. To begin, the budget makes good on the Prime Minister's pledge to reach the North Atlantic Treaty Organization's annual defense spending target of 2% of gross domestic product, adding more than $80 billion in new spending over 5 years. This is key. And so he's talking about, in the article, they mentioned the 3.5% GDP figure that Mr. Carney is trying to reach. And this might look like reckless militarism, but it's not. Canada is finally, or at least seemingly, trying to pay its share to protect its territory, its Arctic, and its economy, right? And really, defense spending, it's not about foreign wars, right? It's about Canada's survival as a functional nation. If your Arctic isn't defended, if your coasts are exposed, if your radar systems aren't your own, but they're dependent on a different country, like NORAD is almost entirely dependent on the US. And if Canada can't even really deploy a brigade without having allies, asking allies for equipment, where are we in this national defense then, right? We're nowhere. We have none, right? And that's why it's easy for Trump to come and push us around, right? Because our national defense is a tragedy right now. And so, like I said, if you can't control your skies, your oceans, or your Arctic, how sovereign are you? And this is exactly what we've been seeing, right? The thing that I don't like about what's going on is that the Liberal government is framing this defense spending as an economic plan because I believe that Canadians don't really want to hear that we're exposed conversation. They want to hear we're going to have more employees, more jobs created, and all of that. So they're spinning this federal budget, this massive, as job creations, which it has a very strong potential of having, right? And if done wisely, great things can come of this, right? But I think that Canadians actually deserve honesty. And defense spending is about actually defending Canada, not so much about job creation. Job creation should just be the add-on to the whole thing. And I think honestly, we could create a ton of jobs. In our military, if we were to build our own military hardware, I think that we would be extremely competitive on the global stage because we're such an energy-rich country. Because we'd be able to, and we're a mineral-rich country as well. So we'd be able to manufacture probably most of what we need to develop high-end military hardware, right? But what is the case is that we've been starving the military, and this is just simply created crisis. And it's the Liberals, the NDP, the Conservatives as well to a certain degree. It's basically since the 90s. You can essentially say that defense has really been something optional, right? And now we're paying the bill. We're paying the bill for this, right? And you can't just neglect the armed forces for 30 years, right? Eventually, you're going to be forced to rebuild them at a much higher cost, right? Last June, Canada endorsed spending 3.5% on core defense by 2035. Unlike Mr. Carney's predecessor, Stephen Harper and Justin Trudeau, blackface right here, who made big defense commitments at NATO summits and then reneged, he seems serious. Yeah, well, I think it's just, I think there's in one of the many conversations that Mark Carney had with Trump, I think it was just made clear that Canada is going to have to start investing in its own military seriously to protect the Arctic. Obviously, we're not privy to backdoor conversations, but I genuinely believe that this is what it was one of the motivating factors. In the article here, it says the cost is sobering. According to one estimate, meeting 3.5% by 2035 would require raising defense spending to about $132 billion in today's dollars. To put that in perspective, the total cost of the Canada Child Benefit is $30 billion, while transfers to provinces to fund healthcare total about $55 billion. How is the federal government going to pay this defense bill for the next 5 years just to sustain increased spending at 2% of GDP? Ottawa will pay through much higher deficits in excess of $65 billion a year on average, but the budget is silent on the move from 2% to 3.5% of GDP. The military does cost a lot of money to sustain, right? But it costs a lot of money to sustain when you haven't been sustaining it, right? And if you just treat it as quick military procurements and not with an actual national strategy, what your military needs to sustain which functions that are critical, you end up falling in serious decay, right? And it doesn't go into it in the article, but the Canadian military is in a very very poor spot. Like, we have a personnel crisis. There's the Canadian Armed Forces are short about 15,000 troops. Some units are at 50 to 60% strength. Recruitment's collapsing. There's probably various reasons for that. Not to get into it, I'm sure that a lot of them are a new generational mentality that exists. I'm going to leave it at that. I don't want to get into why recruitment is low. But obviously, you can't defend a country with a military that's smaller than some police departments, and especially when you're in the G7, right? We need to be leaders on all fronts, right? We need to be at the forefront of everything, and we're not. And case in point is that our Arctic is the most vulnerable, right? It's our crown jewel. And we can't even see what enters it, right? We have no modern northern radar. We have no deep water Arctic port, no ice capable combat ships. We're being outplayed by everybody in the Arctic, right? Russia and China both have much stronger Arctic forces than we do, right? And these are basically the competitors. And it's not like we're gonna enter. I'm genuinely of the opinion that we're not gonna enter a hot conflict with either Russia or China, probably ever, to be honest. But you need to be able to protect your trade routes and your maritime waters. If you don't do that, the political pressure that can be pushed on you through military means escalates drastically, right? You won't have a say in what you'll be able to do, and you won't be able to tell people basically to fuck off if you don't have a capable military of deterring competing forces, right? The military in and of itself is usually just a flexing contest. That's what it comes down to. It's just a massive flex. Again, usually to protect trading routes and obviously your borders. But even with that, there's massive procurement dysfunction. Like, it usually takes 15 plus years for any major acquisition to happen with the Canadian Armed Forces. Navy ships have been delayed by decades. Our fighter program with the F-35s has been dragged on for 12 years. We have equipment shortages everywhere. And so if we're not able to buy equipment or a fighter, how are we supposed to deter anything, right? It's kind of like that with every aspect of the Canadian Armed Forces. We have a lot of work to do, right? I believe that the best way forward, obviously we need short-term procurements because our military is in a state of disaster essentially, but I believe that a large part of this investment that we're going to be doing needs to go into actual manufacturing. Just going to get back into the article there a bit. So it says, the conversation about trade-offs has not yet begun in Ottawa, much less in the country, but it is coming and the government knows it. That is why the defense investment is being framed more as a jobs plan and a jolt to an unproductive economy than it is about defending the country and our allies. Public opinion surveys suggest Canadians now support big increases in defense funding. Be that as it may, the defense consensus is likely paper thin. Historically, Canadians have not been fans of national defense relative to other social and economic priorities. Defense is almost never a big election issue. Still, if defense spending can be structured to deliver visible job creation and economic benefits, the conventional Canadian defense skepticism could be eroded. The Carney government seems to be betting on this. More fundamentally, moving to this level of defense spending implies a redefinition of the role of the federal government, with defense expenditure as the forcing function into one concentrated, much more on its own jurisdictional lanes, our core responsibility, as Carney put it last June. And so this is key. Like, it is a job stink, because let's say the military industrial complex in the US employs a lot of people. it employs a lot of people, and it's one of the key aspects of US manufacturing, like actual manufacturing. And we don't have that, like, at all. Like, it's completely gone, right? And the other thing, though, it's not just we're building this military hardware to protect our. Obviously, if you're building, let's say, an airplane or a sub, right? You're going to need to build the munitions for those as well, right? Actively. So not only do you start building, jets, wings, you build up an aerospace industry, and you have STEM engineers. Not only are you going to be employing them in aerospace, for instance, but you're also going to need to brush up on your rocketry technology as well, because you're going to have to build missiles, right? And so it creates this string of value added technologies that you have to take part in, right? Like, for instance, if you're building submarines, right? Let's say Canada decides that we're going to start building nuclear submarines. We're going to have to start developing our own. We're going to have to build our own sonar technology, our own torpedoes. A whole slew of different things have to go into this, right? And this research and development that goes into it can actually leak into civilian applications, like the microwave. That was military. GPS is military as well. There's a whole number of things that are military applications that are actual civilian now that we just don't even think about anymore, right? And Canada doesn't actually benefit from any of that because we don't have research and development into any of these things, because we have no military industrial complex. All we do is we procure, right? And that type of procurement, I don't want to say it doesn't lead to anything good. Obviously, you have to take care of the ships, you have to take care of the military and all of that. But you're not gonna be the country that's coming up with civilian applications, right? Like South Korea, much smaller country than Canada, population-wise, has a full, practically independent military industrial complex. They're making their own subs, they're making their own planes, they're making their own tanks. Basically, everything they're making on their own, and they have a serious industry. They have their own actual car industry. They have their own avionics, and everything is tied into each other, right? And this is key. This is key because this is how you bring actual value into the economy and defend it, right? When a certain technology gets to a certain point within the military, the government says, hey, let's have this guy open a private company and actually start selling this technology in civilian applications. We can have a unicorn, $1 billion company that's manufacturing something and selling it globally. That's all it is. That's all it is. Computer chip advances were also military. Medical technologies, a lot of them also military. It's just there's so much military technology that goes into civilian application that if you don't actually have that level of expertise, you miss out constantly. And Canada is constantly missing out. And this is the key, right? And this is something that obviously doesn't get touched on a lot. Aside from all of these military companies actually making a ton of money selling, missiles, torpedoes, shells, bullets, the actual planes and the subs and tanks and all of that, they make a ton of money selling the actual equipment. But the research and development that stems from it, always ends up somewhere in a civilian application. And the countries that have developed it earn billions of dollars when they make a civilian company using those technologies. It always happens, right? And this is key. And this is why I think long-term, Canada's best bet is to laser focus. Obviously, we can't have a fully independent military right now because we're just so dependent on foreign equipment. But if we were to spend, let's say, because we're going to be spending 80 billion each year, if we were to set aside, I don't know, however much money, 10 billion, 20 billion into R&D, into building shipyards, submarine ports, that type of stuff, and R&D, and slowly building up a manufacturing base in a specific industry. I'm just using subs as an example. But if we were to do something like that and just laser focused on it, we could be a leading nation in a specific military technology, right? And Canada might be able to, 20, 30 years down the line, 40 years down the line, come out with some amazing sonar technology that comes out into civilian application. We end up having like a $100 billion company, right? That selling some, I don't even know what. I'm just using it as an example because it happens all the time, right? Especially in the US. Yeah, so I mean, here in the article, they just kind of take a dump on blackface here, because it says this represents a big shift from blackface Justin's years when Ottawa spent most of its intellectual energy and money on social programs, childcare, pharmacare, and dental care, to name three, largely in provincial jurisdiction. Mr. Trudeau's government prioritized this agenda out of conviction and calculation, believing it was what Canadians needed and wanted. I mean, I'm all for social programs. Honestly, I think childcare, pharmacare, and dental care are great things. But to be fair, I mean, how much lack of money was going into the military, and everything was going into these social programs, and our medical industry is still a catastrophe. Like, we haven't actually fixed the Canadian medical system. Like, we still have massive wait lines. So where'd all that money go? Blackface. We need a serious audit into blackface Justin and everybody that was around him, to be honest. This is all I have for you guys today. Hope you guys liked today's episode. Please like, share, and subscribe. My name is Miloš Krajčnik. Stay informed, stay curious, and God bless Canada.
This is Canada. Maple syrup and like Captain Say. Kick your ass all hockey season. Mounties be riding.